Hello, good afternoon, evening. It's that 5 o'clock hour. It's kind of whichever you prefer it to be. So, I have my coffee. Coffee. Today, September 6th, we are going to start Edgar Allan Poe. This is my copy. I have had this copy for 20 years. I started reading this in 4th grade. Poe. Because I didn't go outside and play with the other kids. I sat inside during recess and read Edgar Allan Poe. So yes, this is my copy. It's a little worn out. Its binding's a little messed up. But I love this book. And it has beautiful artwork in it. And I'm hoping to finish this series up around Halloween. We'll see. But this is Edgar Allan Poe, 42 Tales, including The Fall of the House of Usher, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, I can talk, and The Pit and the Pendulum, complete and unabridged. So, today, and the illustrations are by Harry Clark, and I will be showing you all of them. A brief Before we actually start the story, there's a little paragraph about Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1809, but on the death of his parents was adopted by John Allan and his wife from Richmond in Virginia. They traveled to England, and Edgar was sent to school at Stoke Newington for 5 years. On the return to America, he was noted as a brilliant pupil at Richmond School and then at the University of Virginia. On his 18th birthday, he published Tamburlaine and Other Poems. He was dismissed from the military academy after 2 years, quarreled with the Allans, and turned to journalism without initial success. He worked for various periodicals in Baltimore, Virginia, and New York, where he published the first of his stories. But it was not until he settled in Philadelphia that he gained a reputation as a writer and his work became popular. Tragedy struck with the illness and subsequent death of his wife, which affected Poe very seriously. He took to drink and died in 1849. The illustrations first appeared in Tales of Mystery and Imagination by E.A. Poe and are reproduced here. So there's a whole list of illustrations. Alright. Message found in a bottle. Qui n'a plus qu'un moment à vivre. Na plus rien est dissimulé. I probably said that totally wrong. Whatever. Of my country and of my family, I have little to say. Ill usage and length of years have driven me from the one and estranged me from the other. Hereditary wealth afforded me an education of no common order, and a contemplative turn of mind enabled me to methodize the stores which early study very diligently garnered up. Beyond all things, the work of the German moralists gave me great detail, not from any ill-advised admiration of their eloquent madness, but from the ease with which my habits of rigid thought enabled me to detect their falsities. I have often been reproached with the aridity of my genius. A deficiency of imagination has been imputed to me as a crime, and the Pyrrhonism of my opinions have at all times rendered me notorious. Indeed, a strong relish for physical philosophy has, I fear, tinctured my mind with a very common error of this age. I mean the habit of referring occurrences even the least susceptible of such reference to the principles of that science. Upon the whole, no person should be less liable than myself to be led away from the severe precincts of truth by the ignis fatui of superstition. I have thought proper to premise this much, lest the incredible tale I have to tell should be considered rather the raving of a crude imagination than the positive experience of a mind to which the reveries of fancy have been a dead letter and a nullity. After many years spent in foreign travel, I sailed in the year 18 from the port of Batavia in the rich and populous island of Java on a voyage to the archipelago of... I know I said that wrong. Archipelago of the Sunda Islands. I went as passenger, having no other inducement than the kind of nervous restlessness which haunted me as a fiend. Our vessel was the beautiful ship of about 400 tons, copper-fastened, and built at Bombay of Malabar teak. She was freighted with cool cotton, wool, and oil from the Lachadive Islands. We also on board jaggery, coconuts, and a few cases of opium. The stowage was clumsily done, and the vestige constantly crank. We got under way with a mere breath of wind, and for many days stood along the eastern coast of Java, without any other incident to beguile the monotony of our course than the occasional meeting with some of the small grabs of the archipelago to which we were bound. One evening, trailing after the taffrail, I observed a very singular isolated cloud to the northwest. It was remarkable, as well for its color as from its first being as It was remarkable, as well for its color as from its being the first we had seen since our departure from Batavia. I watched it attentively until sunset, when it spread all at once to the eastward and westward, girding in the horizon with a narrow strip of vapor, and looking like a long line of low beach. My notice was soon afterwards attracted by the dusky red appearance of the moon, and the peculiar character of the sea. The latter was undergoing a rapid change, and the water seemed more than usually transparent. Though I could distinctly see the bottom, yet heaving the lead, I found the ship in 15 fathoms. The air now becoming intolerably hot, and the load with spiral exhalations similar to those arising from heated iron. As night came on, every breath of wind died away, and a more entire calm it is impossible to conceive. The flame of a candle burned upon the poop without the least perceptible motion, and a long hair, held between finger and thumb, hung without the possibility of detecting a vibration. However, as the captain said he could perceive no indication of danger, and as we were drifting in bodily to shore, he ordered the sails to be furled and the anchor let go. No watch was set, and the crew, consisting principally of Malays, stretched themselves deliberately upon the deck. I went below, not without a full presentiment of evil. Indeed, every appearance warranted me in apprehending a simoon. I don't know what a simoon is. Let me look that up real quick. It's gonna be slow. There it goes. Simoon. S-I-M-O-O-M. Let's see. A hot, dry, dust-laden wind blowing in the desert, especially in Arabia. interesting to be using it here. Alright. I told the captain my fears, but he paid no attention to what I said, and left me without deigning to give a reply. My uneasiness, however, prevented me from sleeping, and about midnight I went upon deck. As I placed my foot upon the upper step of the companion ladder, I was startled by a low humming noise, like that occasioned by the rapid revolution of a mill wheel, and before I could ascertain its meaning, I found the ship quivering to its center. In the next instant, a wilderness of foam hurled upon our beam ends, and rushing over us fore and aft, swept the entire deck from stem to stern. The extreme fury of the blast proved, in a great measure, the salvation of the ship. Although completely waterlogged, yet as her masts had gone by the board, she rose after a minute heavily from the sea, and staggered a while beneath the immense pressure of the tempest, finally righted. By what miracle I escaped destruction it is impossible to say. Stunned by the shock of the water, I found myself, upon recovery, jammed in between the stern post and rudder. With great difficulty I gained my feet and looked dizzily around, was at first struck with the idea of our being among breakers so terrific, beyond the wildest imagination, was the whirlpool of mountainous and foaming ocean within which we were engulfed. After a while I heard the voice of an old Swede, who had shipped with us at the moment of our leaving port. I hallooed to him with all my strength, and presently he came reeling aft. We soon discovered that we were the sole survivors of the accident. All on deck, with the exception of ourselves, had been swept overboard. The captain and mates must have perished as they slept, for the cabins were deluged with water. Without assistance, we could expect to do little for the security of the ship, and our exertions were at first paralyzed by the momentary expectation of going down. Our cable had, of course, parted like pack thread. At the first breath of the hurricane, or we should have been instantaneously overwhelmed. We scudded with frightful velocity before the sea, and the water made clear breach over us. The framework of our stern was shattered excessively, and in almost every respect we had received considerable injury. But to our extreme joy, we found the pumps unchoked, and that we made no great shifting of our ballast. The main fury of the blast had been already blown over. We apprehended little danger from the violence of the wind, but we looked forward to its total cessation with dismay, well believing that in our shattered condition we should inevitably perish in the tremendous swell which would ensue. But this very just apprehension seemed by no means likely to be soon verified. For 5 entire days and nights, during which our only subsistence was a small quantity of jaggery, procured with great difficulty from the forecastle, the hulk blew at a rate defying computation before rapidly succeeding flaws of wind, which, without equaling the first violence of the simoon, were still more terrific than any tempest I had before encountered. Our course for the first 4 days was with trifling variation, southeast and by south, and we must have run down the coast of New Holland. On the 5th day the cold became extreme, although the wind had hauled round a point more to the northward. The sun arose with a sickly yellow lustre, and clambered a very few degrees above the horizon, emitting no decisive light. There were no clouds apparent, yet the wind was upon the increase, and blew with a fitful and unsteady fury. About noon, as nearly as we could guess, our attention was again arrested by the appearance of the sun. It gave out no light, properly so called, but a dull and sullen glow without reflection, as if all of its rays were polarized. Just before sinking within the turgid sea, its central fire suddenly went out, as if hurriedly extinguished by some unaccountable power. It was a dim, silver-like rim alone, as it rushed down the unfathomable ocean. We waited in vain for the arrival of the 6th day, That day to me has not arrived, to the Swede never did arrive. Thenceforth we were enshrouded in pitchy darkness, so that we could not have seen an object at 20 paces from the ship. Eternal night continued to envelop us, all unrevealed by the phosphoric sea brilliancy to which we had been accustomed in the tropics. We observed, too, that although the tempest continued to rage with unabated violence, there was no longer to be discovered the usual appearance of surf or sea or foam, which had hitherto attended us. All around were horror and thick gloom, and a black, sweltering desert of ebony. Superstitious terror crept by degrees into the spirit of the old Swede, and my own soul was wrapped up in silent wonder. We neglected all of the care of the ship as worse than useless, and securing ourselves as well as possible to the stump of the mizzen-mast, looked out bitterly into the world of ocean. We had no means of calculating time, nor could we form any guess of our situation. We were, however, well aware of having made farther to the southward than any previous navigators, and felt great amazement at not meeting with the usual impediments of ice. In the meantime, every moment threatened to be our last. Every mountainous billow hurried to overwhelm us, the swell surpassing anything I had imagined possible, and we were not instantly buried in a miracle. Excuse me. My companion spoke of the lightness of our cargo, and reminded me of the excellent qualities of our ship, but I could not feel the utter hopelessness of hope itself, and prepared myself gloomily for that death, which I thought nothing could defer beyond an hour, as with every knot of way the ship made, the swelling, the black, stupendous sea become more dismally appalling. At times we gasped for breath at an elevation beyond the albatross. At times became dizzy with the velocity of our descent in some watery hell, where the air grew stagnant, and no sounds disturbed the slumbers of the kraken. Coffee. We are at the bottom of one of the abysses, when a quick scream from my companion broke fearfully upon the night. "See! See!" cried he, shrieking in my ears. "Almighty God! See! See!" As he spoke, I became aware of a dull, sullen glare of red, which streamed down the sides of our vast chasm where we lay, and threw a fitful brilliancy upon our deck. Casting my eyes upward, I beheld a spectacle which froze the current of my blood. At a terrific height directly above us, and upon the very verge of the precipitous descent, hovered a gigantic ship of perhaps 4,000 tons. Although upreared upon the summit of a wave more than 100 times her own altitude, her apparent size still exceeded that of any ship of the line or East Indiaman in existence. Her huge hull was the deep, dingy black, unrevealed by any of the customary carvings of a ship. A single row of brass cannons protruded from her open ports, and dashed from their polished surfaces the fires of innumerable battle lanterns, which swung to and fro from her riggings. But what mainly inspired us with horror and astonishment was that she bore up under a press of sail in the very teeth of that supernatural storm, and of that ungovernable hurricane. When we first discovered her, her bows were alone to be seen, as she rose slowly from the dim and horrible gulf beyond her. For a moment of intense terror, she paused upon the giddy pinnacle, as if in contemplation of her own sublimity, then trembled and tottered and came down. At this instant, I know not what self-possession came over my spirit. Staggering as far aft as I could, I waited fearlessly in the ruin of what was to overwhelm. Our own vessel was at length ceasing from her struggles, and was sinking with her head to the sea. The shock of the descending mast struck her. Consequently, in the portion of her frame that was already under water, and the inevitable result was to hurl me with irresistible violence upon the rigging of the stranger. As I fell, the ship hove in stays and went about, and to the confusion ensuing I attributed my escape from the notice of the crew. With little difficulty I made my way, unperceived, to the main hatchway, which was partially open, and soon found an opportunity of secreting myself into the hold. Why I did so I can hardly tell. An indefinite sense of awe, which at first sight of the navigators of the ship had taken hold of my mind, was perhaps the principle of my concealment. I was unwilling to trust myself with a race of people who had offered to the cursory glance I had taken so many points of vague novelty, doubt, and apprehension. I therefore thought proper to contrive a hiding place in this hold. This I did by removing a small portion of the shifting boards, in which manner as to afford me a convenient retreat between the huge timbers of the ship. I had scarcely completed my work when a footstep in the hold forced me to be made of use. I almost knocked my computer over. I had scarcely completed my work when a footstep in the hold forced me to make use of it. A man passed by my place of concealment with a feeble and unsteady gait. I could not see his face, but had an opportunity of observing his general appearance. There was about it an evidence of great age and infirmity. His knees tottered beneath loads of years, his entire frame quivered under the burden. He muttered to himself in a low, broken tone some words of a language I could not understand, and groped in a corner among a pile of singular-looking instruments and decayed charts of navigation. His manner was a wild mixture of the peevishness of second childhood and the solemn dignity of a god. He at length went on deck, and I saw him no more. A feeling for which I have no name has taken possession of my soul, a sensation which will admit of no analysis, to which the lessons of bygone time are inadequate, and for which I fear futurity itself will offer me no key. To a mind constituted like my own, the latter consideration is an evil. I know that I shall never, be satisfied with regard to the nature of my conceptions. Yet it is not wonderful that these conceptions are indefinite, since they have their origin in sources so utterly novel. A new sense, a new entity is added to my soul. It is long since I first trod the deck of this terrible ship, and the rays of my destiny are, I think, gathering to a focus. Incomprehensible men. Whew, my lunch is taking revenge. Alright, where was I? Wrapped up in mediations of a kind which I cannot divine, they pass me by unnoticed. Concealment is utter folly on my part, for the people will not see. It was but just now that I passed directly before the eyes of the mate. It was no long a while that I ventured into the captain's own private cabin, and took thence the materials in which I write and have written. I shall from time to time continue this journal. It is true that I may not find an opportunity of transmitting it to the world, but I will not fail to make the endeavor. At the last moment I will enclose the message in a bottle and cast it within the sea. An incident has occurred which has given me new room for mediation. Are such things an operation of ungoverned chance? I have ventured upon the deck and thrown myself down without attracting any notice, among a pile of rattling stuff and old sails, in the bottom of the yawl. While musing upon the singularity of my fate, I unwittingly dubbed with the tar brush the edges of a neatly folded studded sail, which lay near me on a barrel. The studding sail is now bent upon the ship, and the thoughtless touches of the brush are spread out into the word Discovery. I made many observations lately upon the structure of the vessel. Although well armed, she is not, I think, a ship of war. Her rigging, build, and general equipment all negative a supposition of this kind. That she is not, I can easily perceive. What she is, I fear it is impossible to say. I know not how it is, but in scrutinizing her strange model and singular cast of spars, her huge sides and overgrown suits of canvas, her severely simple bow and antiquated stern, there will occasionally flash across my mind a sensation of familiar things, and there is always mixed up with such indistinct shadow of recollection an unaccountable memory of old foreign chronicles and ages long ago. So before I go on to the next section, there is a picture. Caption for it is, "Incomprehensible men wrapped up in mediations of a kind which I cannot divine. They pass me by unnoticed." Pretty awesome picture. I have been looking at the timbers of the ship. She is built of a material to which I am a stranger. There is a peculiar character upon the wood which strikes me as rendering it unfit for the purpose to which it has been applied. I mean its extreme porousness, considered independently of the worm-eating condition which is a consequence of navigation in these seas, and apart from the rottenness attendant upon age. It will, perhaps, an observation somewhat over-curious, but this wood would have every characteristic of Spanish oak, if Spanish oak were distended by any unnatural means. In reading the above sentence, a curious apothegm of an old weather-beaten Dutch navigator comes upon my recollection. "It is as sure," he was wont to say when any doubt was entertained of his veracity, "as sure as there is a sea where the ship itself will grow in bulk, like the living body of the seaman." About an hour ago I made bold to thrust myself upon a group of the crew. They paid me no manner of attention, although I stood in the very midst of them all, seemed utterly unconscious of my presence. Like the one I had first seen in the hold, they all bore upon them the marks of hoary old age. Their knees trembled with infirmity, their shoulders were bent double with decrepitude, their shriveled skins rattled in the wind, their voices were low, tremulous. Sometimes my pronunciation's off because I taught myself how to say a lot of words by reading and not actually hearing them. So just deal with it. Tremulous and broken. Their eyes glistened with the rheum of years, and their gray hairs streamed terribly in the tempest. Around them on every part of the deck lay scattered mathematical instruments of the most quaint and obsolete construction. I mentioned some time ago the bending of a stunning sail. From that period the ship, being thrown dead off the wind, has continued her terrific course due south, with every rag of canvas packed upon her, from her trucks to her lower studding sail booms, and rolling every moment her top-gallant yardarms into the most appalling hell of water which it can enter into the mind of man to imagine. I have just left the deck, where I find it impossible to maintain a footing, although the crew seems to experience little inconvenience. It appears to me a miracle of miracles, that our enormous bulk is not swallowed up at once and forever. We are surely doomed to hover continually upon the brink of eternity, without taking a plunge into the abyss. From billows 1,000 times more stupendous than any I have ever seen, we glide away with the facility of the arrowy seagull, and the colossal waters rear their heads above us like demons of the deep. But like demons confined to the simple threats and forbidden to destroy, I am led to attribute these frequent escapes to the only natural cause which can be account for such a fact. I must suppose the ship to be within the influence of some strong current or impetuous undertow. I have seen the captain face to face and in his own cabin, but as I expected, he paid me no attention. Although in his appearance there is, to a casual observer, nothing which might bespeak him more or less than man, still a feeling of irreprehensible reverence and awe mingle with the sensation of wonder which I regarded him. In stature he is nearly my own height, that is, about 5 feet 8 inches. He is of well-knit and compact frame of body, neither robust nor remarkable otherwise, but it is the singularity of the expression which reigns upon the frame. It is the intense, the wonderful, the thrilling evidence of old age, so utter, so extreme, which excites within my spirit a sense and sentiment ineffable. His forehead, although a little wrinkled, seems to bear upon it the stamp of a myriad of years. His gray hair are records of the past, and his grayer eyes are symbols of the future. The cabin floor was thickly strewn with strange iron-clasped folios and moldering instruments of science and obsolete, long-forgotten charts. His head was bowed upon his hands, and he pored with the fiery, unquiet eye over a paper which I took to be a commission, which at all events bore the signature of a monarch. He muttered to himself, as did the first seaman who I saw in the hold, some low, peevish syllables of a foreign tongue, and although the speaker was close at my elbow, his voice seemed to reach my ears from the distance of a mile. The ship and all in it are imbued with the spirits of eld. The crew glide to and fro like the ghosts of buried cemeteries. Their eyes have an eager and uneasy meaning, and their figures fall athwart my path in a wild glare of the battle lanterns. I feel as I have never felt before, although I have been in my life a dealer in antiquities, and have imbibed the shadows of fallen columns at Baalbec and Tadmor and Persepolis, until my very soul has become a ruin. When I look around me, I feel ashamed of my former apprehensions. If I tremble at the blast which has hitherto attended us, shall I not stand aghast at a warring of wind and ocean, to convey any idea of which the words tornado and simoon are trivial and ineffective? All in the immediate vicinity of the ship is the blackness of eternal night and the chaos of foamless water. But about a league on either side of us may be seen indistinctly and at intervals stupendous ramparts of ice towering away into the desolate sky and looking like the walls of the universe. As I imagine, the ship proves to be in a current, if that appellation can properly be given to a tide which, howling and shrieking by the wide ice, thunders on to the southward with a velocity like the headlong dashing of a cataract. To conceive the horror of my sensation is, I presume, utterly impossible. Yet the curiosity to penetrate the mysteries of these awful regions predominates even over my despair. and will reconcile me to the most hideous aspect of death. It is evident that we are hurrying onwards to some exciting knowledge, some never to be imparted secret whose attainment is destruction. Perhaps this current leads us to the southern pole itself. It must be confessed with a supposition apparently so wild that every probability in its favor. The crew paced the deck with unquiet and tremulous steps, but there is upon their countenances an expression more of the eagerness of hope than the apathy of despair. In the meantime the wind is still in our poop, and we carry a crowd of canvas. The ship is at times lifted bodily out of the sea. Oh, horror upon horror! The ice opens suddenly to the right and to the left, and we are whirling dizzily in an immense concentric circles round and round the borders of a gigantic amphitheater. The summit of those walls is lost in the darkness in the distance, but little time will be left to ponder upon my destiny. The swirls rapidly grow smaller. We are plunging madly within the grasp of the whirlpool, and amid a roaring and bellowing and thundering of ocean of tempest, the ship is quivering, oh God, and going down. Note: The Message Found in a Bottle was originally published in 1831. It was not until many years afterward that I became acquainted with the maps of Mercator, in which the ocean is represented as rushing by 4 months into the northern polar gulf to be absorbed into the bowels of earth, the pole itself being represented by a black rock towering to a prodigious height.